else can clean up that mess?
Too nutty, too bolty. The Banjo and the Kazooie. I don't know, what should we call this hypothetical Banjo-Kazooie sequel throughout this episode? I need a good sequel name, Shane. Help me figure it out.
How about Banjo-Threeie?
Yeah, we could call it that, but I feel like the rest of the internet really, really, really wants to call it Banjo-Threeie because they refuse to accept Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts as any part of the actual sequential numbering. So we'll call it Banjo-Threeie, and we'll call this podcast The Kongversation because of the clever pun factor. I'm Hyle Russell. How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Who are you?
Slept
Who are
for
you?
almost
Who are you?
2
Say your
hours.
name. Say your name.
Marchis.
Say your name.
Marchis. Marchis.
All right.
It's a bit nerve-wracking being on my first important episode as far as our social media followers probably are concerned.
Horseshit. Brawl Out was a very, very important episode.
It was a very, very important episode. It's just, up till now, I've done the episodes for the games that nobody else wants to play.
Well, there was Brawl Out, there was Super Mario Party. Oh, no, wait, you weren't on Super Mario Party. That was David,
Yeah,
right?
that was David.
Yeah. You were on Mario Tennis Aces.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Brawl Out. Everybody loves Brawl Out now that Yooka-Laylee are playable on the Switch version. They finally updated the old Switch version.
That's good.
And they got Yooka-Laylee in there. And now you can have all of your dystopian post-apocalyptic warlords fighting Yooka-Laylee on the Switch. So it's great. So yeah, we're doing this episode, Shane. This Banjo-Threeie, as we call it, episode, because I basically said it as a joke at the top of the last episode. I was like, fuck you, we're doing a Sea of Thieves episode. I don't give a shit whether you like it or not. I'm very cursy. This episode, I apologize. I apologize to all of the Amish who are listening. But I was like, okay, look, we'll do a Sea of Thieves episode. We got to do it for Forsaken Shores. We got to talk about it. And, maybe you'll get something sweet, some desserts afterwards, like a Banjo-Threeie episode, saying it in jest. But here we are. I'm a man of my word. You're going to get a Banjo-Threeie episode of The Kongversation. So basically what this is just us talking and speculating and trying to suss out what the hell a new Banjo-Kazooie game would look like, because it is a harder question to answer than you would think. And we've talked about this a little bit here and there on The Kongversation, but we've never actually sat down and done an entire episode about Banjo-Threeie or whatever the hell you want to call it. So that's what we're doing this episode.
Let me just say, as a Sea of Thieves fan, doing a Banjo-Threeie episode kind of feels like what it would probably feel like to be a Donkey Kong fan doing a podcast about what Metroid Prime 4 is going to be like back in 2014.
See, in my happy, sugar-coated world, Sea of Thieves and Banjo fans are one and the same, because they're us. They're the two of us, and there's no problems to be had here. So I would be happy with the new Banjo game. I'd be happy with 30 more years of continual Sea of Thieves updates and nothing else from Rare. So, you know what? Whatever happens, I'm smiling at the end of the day, Shane. So that's all that matters. And so through my smiling, through my gritted, happy teeth, I'm going to do some due diligence right now. So buckle in. Visit dkvine.com after you listen to this episode. We are a Donkey Kong Universe website, and then that means basically we cover everything, starting with the game Donkey Kong Country from 1994 and spinning out of that franchise. So that includes Banjo-Kazooie, that includes Conker. Yes, people on Twitter. Yes, they were actually introduced in Diddy Kong Racing. Some people have trouble believing this, that Banjo and Conker were introduced in Diddy Kong Racing, because people think, oh no, Diddy Kong Racing was just this character crossover game like like Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing with Banjo-Kazooie. What do you mean Banjo was first introduced in Diddy Kong Racing? That's not historically accurate. I know that's not right. It is. And you can read all about it on DK
Next you're going to tell me Banjo was owned by Nintendo.
Let's not even open that scab, because I have bled out from that wound so much on social media. Look, Nintendo did have a ownership stake in the Banjo-Kazooie characters because they owned a percentage of Rare at the time. They never fully outright owned Rare, but it's very complicated. But yes, they did. Okay, whatever. DK Vine, please support us on Patreon if you want. DKVine.com/Patreon. You get to listen to the conversation live. Yeah. You get to get early episodes and other content 24 hours before anyone else. So you can do a whole Jack Bauer adventure and listen to our podcast, and then go to bed while everybody else then listens to it. So if you want to live your life and not be burdened by the public release schedules for DK Vine content, you gotta back us on Patreon. You gotsta. And we got stickers, free stickers, and other shit we'll shovel down your throat. I told you I'm very sweary this episode, and I don't know why. I think it's because I feel like I'm going to be talking about Banjo-Threeie, and then that makes me part of the problem. But I want a new Banjo game. It's not that I don't want a new Banjo game. I just don't want to be part of the whiny contingent.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's like I'm trying to be very, very cautious with this episode because, yeah, I want a new Banjo game. Of course I do. I'll gladly have another Banjo game, but we'll get into that. I'm jumping the gun here.
Like, I know other Rare fans who almost don't want another Banjo game just because they're sick and tired of hearing a certain subset of Rare fans only want a Banjo game.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Like Tony/Mamechi was saying the other day, it'd be funny if Rare did give Banjo back to Nintendo, only for Nintendo to not do anything with the license.
DK Vine on Facebook, DK Vine on Twitter, DK Vine on YouTube. Find us all at dkvine.com/whatever that is, or whatever that is /DKVine. It works both ways. We're very progressive that way. Also, don't forget to call the DK Vine hotline at 1-202-630-VINE. That's 8463. If you wonder how people call into the conversation and get their calls played, that's how they do it. They call that number, they dial that number, they leave us a message, they talk about the topic at hand, which you can usually find on social media. Well, I say usually, always. You can always find it on social media. And just plug into those previously aforementioned social media feeds, and you'll know what the topic of the conversation is. Or if you back us on Patreon, it gets emailed to you. But anyway, yeah, you can join the conversation by chatting with us by calling the DK Vine hotline. Once again, that number is 1-202-630-VINE, spells Vine, but you got to type in 8463 for it to spell Vine. I find that the younger people don't really understand that phone numbers can also spell out words. It's kind of an antiquated thing that like shady lawyers and other things would use to like, did asbestos coat your lungs? Well, then dial 1-202-630-VINE to get your settlement. Please don't do that. I can't give you any settlement for asbestos covered lungs. But it spells Vine because we're DK Vine, and Donkey Kong swings on a vine. But it's also like the grapevine. I heard it through the grapevine. I heard it through DK Vine, the vine that Donkey Kong's swinging on. But it's also got news coming through it into your ears. That's what DK Vine. That's the pun, Shane.
It's a very clever pun.
Yeah, it's and also we got to say congratulations to DM Combo and Platonic Games for successfully Kickstarter backing Yooka-Laylee and the Cracklestone, the upcoming official graphic novel continuation of Yooka-Laylee. DM Combo was on this show several weeks ago. Sat down for an interview with Cameron and myself. Had a lovely time, and it's so great to see that not only was it successfully kickstartered, it actually hit its first stretch goal, which means that the cover is going to be all shiny and poofy and whatnot. So that's a good milestone to reach. To get all shiny and poofy, you got to reach those stretch goals. So congrats, DM Combo. I'm looking forward to reading that, and I'm also paying a pretty penny for it too. So I will have to basically, it's going to be one of the more valuable things in my home now because I live in squalor. So I'm looking forward to it, but I'm gonna have to keep it in a bank vault as a result. Yeah. Shane, welcome to the show. Welcome to the important show. This is what the important conversations feel like. Ooh, this is what people are tuning in for right here. Smash Brothers and bitching about Banjo, the lack of Banjo, I guess. No. Let's get serious about Banjo-Threeie. And I say Banjo-Threeie because at the end of Banjo-Tooie, Gruntilda, as a decapitated skull, says, Just you wait until Banjo-Threeie, and then we never got a Banjo-Threeie. We got Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts instead.
Can we just clarify that somebody at Rare, I don't remember who, said that was always a joke?
Yeah, but the problem with that is that at the end of Banjo-Kazooie, they said Banjo-Tooie, and Banjo-Tooie was dead serious. So most people won't ever take that as a joke, and they're going to be waiting until the Brawl Out Apocalypse, when Apocalypse comes around. They're going to be waiting until that day for their Banjo-Threeie, despite we could have dozens of Banjo games between now and then, and they could all have a multitude of different titles, like Banjo-Kazooie Getting Jiggy With It. Wouldn't that be a shitty title?
Yeah.
And people will be like, well, yeah, but that's not Banjo-Threeie. People are like laser focused on this particular title, and it feels like they won't ever accept a Banjo sequel as the legitimate heir to the first two unless it's called Banjo-Threeie. It's a conundrum. I don't really know how to get around it. I'm not actually suggesting during this episode that Rare should, or whoever should call it Banjo-Threeie, because I think that would be that wouldn't mean anything to the vast majority of the game purchasing public. Banjo-Threeie is a very insular term for the most diehard fans, and
yeah,
I don't know. Like, maybe you could have a flip cover. Maybe it could be like the Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze for Switch cover, where you call it something on the one that's actually displayed in stores. But if you want, you can reverse the cover, and in there it's called Banjo-Threeie. Fuck you. You got your Banjo-Threeie in your own personal canon. That's what it's called. That might be the best option, Shane. I don't really know.
Yeah, that would probably be a good compromise. I'm a big fan of Kazooie, and I kind of want her name to be in the title.
So call it 3-0 Kazooie then.
Sure.
Because that pun makes even less sense. Well, 3 isn't even a pun. It's just a shitty. It's just a shitty name.
It was always a shit take. It was. We were never gonna get Banjo-Threeie.
Like, you could call it something else and pay homage to Banjo-Threeie somehow.
It doesn't even feel right to say.
But we're gonna be calling it that for simplicity's sake, because everybody, when they think the next console Banjo game, they're thinking Banjo-Threeie. And look, let's get this out in the open right now, Shane. All right, I don't have any issue with Nuts and Bolts. Once upon a time, sure. When Nuts and Bolts came out, there was a little bit of bait and switch with the marketing, and we've said our piece about that. But at the end of the day, Nuts and Bolts was a decade ago. More than a decade ago at this point. So
yeah, it turned 10 like last week.
It is a fine game. It's a great game. Not the game we all wanted, but, the Rolling Stones once said, you can't always get what you want. And they also said some other stuff like Under My Thumb, which was kind of misogynistic, but they and then they also had Sympathy for the Devil, and then they were talking about Starting You Up, which was then used in every computer commercial in the mid 90s. So my point is the Rolling Stones are not as good as the Beatles.
I would agree with that.
I like a lot of the Stones stuff, but you look at the wide breadth, you actually get into the Stones deep tracks and you're like, wow, that's another generic blues cover. Okay. And you get into the Beatles deep tracks, especially later on, and you're like, oh, this is a great song. Oh, here we go. Hey, the Beatles. And so my point is that the Beatles, the White Album, 50th anniversary, 6-disc set. I'm not a big fan of the packaging, Shane, because it's hard to get a pristine edition of that because the packaging is oriented such that it gets dinged up easy in transit. So that kind of pisses me off. Oh, wait. Oh no, we're sorry.
Banjo-Threeie.
Banjo-Threeie, yeah. Nuts and bolts. I like nuts and bolts.
Nuts and bolts. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I think I got over it the second time I watched that initial trailer.
It took me longer to get over it, and I didn't get over it until enough time had passed, and it didn't matter anymore. And honestly, I never really had the white burning, discomfort of some other people, even on staff. I was like, oh, it's okay. Even back in 2008, I was trying to or 2007 or whenever we actually found out about it, I was trying to justify. I was like, well, it's just, it might be like the old games, but with vehicles, maybe we should give it a chance. And, it was a little bit more nuanced than that, but I think it was ahead of its time. And if it came out a couple years later, it would have done a lot better.
I mean, it's a bit cliche to say it would have been a better game if they used a different character, but that's probably the case.
But they also had to kind of feed the beast. People were demanding a new Banjo game. People, since the buyout happened in 2002, that became the immediate thing everybody was looking for. It was Banjo. When's a new Banjo game? When's the new Perfect Dark game? And Perfect Dark Zero launched the 360 and, didn't really impress too many people.
Oh, yeah, even I'm not a big fan of Perfect Dark Zero.
Yeah, but, everybody was just focused after Zero came out on Banjo, the next Banjo. When's the next Banjo? And, of course, Rare tried several different tactics to do a Banjo game. Initially, they were going to do Banjo X, where it was going to be the original Banjo-Kazooie, but remade for the Xbox. And sort of a Conquer Live and Reloaded situation. And really, thank Log they did not do that, because I don't think that would have really pleased anybody. It would have pleased more people than Nuts and Bolts, maybe, but I think...
It really wasn't the time for that. I think maybe in this age of the Crash and Spyro remakes, sure, but not back then. It was too soon.
It was too soon, and let's be frank. I mean, the 3D platformer did kind of peter out, and I totally get, especially since... You look at the Banjo team, and, head of design was Greg Mayles. They never did 3 games for anything. They did the first 2 Donkey Kong Country games. They moved on to Dream, which became Banjo-Kazooie. They did Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, and then they moved on. And I feel like asking them to churn out a 3rd game, they didn't have anything else to say. So... yeah, we got third Donkey Kong Country game, but people forget that was a different team. And it worked out fine when they, passed the reins. But of course, there was also just a year between 2 and 3. So the wide gulf between Tooie and Nuts and Bolts built up so much demand for the new Banjo game. And of course, Nuts and Bolts wasn't what anybody was expecting. It was so wildly divergent from what we could have possibly dreamt of. Besides that one person on the DK Vine forum who made a joke years earlier that the next Banjo game was going to be called Nuts and Bolts.
He goes by the name Lighthouse now. He says he did not edit that post, but I don't know.
I'll take him at his word for it. It's one of the curiosities of the DK Vine forum history. That because why would you even land on that?
They should name the next Banjo game after a Donkey Kong Country 3 song, like Banjo-Kazooie Waterworld or Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts.
That's such a that doesn't even make any sense. Like, what is the context of that? That would I would argue that there is chicanery afoot there. Maybe he did edit it. I'll believe him. But I don't know.
For admins and mods, is there a way to see edit history and posts, or would you have to go into the admin CP and look through the moderation history?
I don't even. I've never had to do that. I've never had to actually do that. So. That's a good question for another day, perhaps. But obviously then, the whole He Who Shall Not Be Named video on Nuts and Bolts really made it infamous among the larger gaming community. And then I think at a certain point, the people still fans of Rare and still fans of the people working at Rare and still believing in the dream of Rare kind of rallied around to its defense. In a weird way, that video, which gained so much notoriety and it shaped so much opinion about Nuts and Bolts in the broader consensus, I think it had a positive effect in that it did make people like me and other people on DK Vine take a step back and say, okay, Nuts and Bolts wasn't what we wanted when it came out, but does it deserve this level of disdain? Because it's actually a decent game. It's actually a brilliant game in its own way. It's just not in any way the same skeletal structure as where Banjo-Tooie left off. Okay, so enough time has passed now. I completely appreciate Nuts and Bolts for what it is, and I really do love it. Same thing happened with me with Jungle Beat. And Jungle Beat, I got over all of that when we got a new Donkey Kong Country with Donkey Kong Country Returns, and that was brought back, and all of a sudden Jungle Beat wasn't a concern anymore. It no longer posed a threat. So I was able to go back and say, hey, actually Jungle Beat's pretty brilliant in its own right. Not the way I would have done Donkey Kong, but you know what? I like it. It was a lot of fun to play.
I actively want another one that is maybe more grounded and more like the World Rare and Retro gave us, but still has the rhythm bongo type controls. I think that would be fun. Especially if they got a David Wise soundtrack.
If we're only getting one major console Donkey Kong game per generation, I don't want to waste it on another Jungle Beat. If it was in addition to a country game or a 3D platformer, absolutely. But, at this point, it's just but enough time has passed for the original Jungle Beat that I'm able to go back and say, it's kind of a curiosity in a lot of respects, but it's still really great. And Nuts and Bolts, same thing. Even though we haven't gotten a new Banjo game to kind of soothe that initial burn of realizing what it was going to be, we got Yooka-Laylee, and enough good things have happened with Rare and the broader shared universe that I'm able to go back in Nuts and Bolts and say, okay, yeah, that was a good game too.
A lot of people have observed that Nuts and Bolts is kind of the opposite of Jungle Beat, where Nuts and Bolts still had the spirit of Banjo, but the gameplay was totally different. While Jungle Beat's rhythm-based gameplay was kind of reminiscent of the hop and bop gameplay of the country games, but stylistically it was totally different.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that, and And of course, there is also the fact that Nuts and Bolts was made by mostly the original creative team.
What?
Yeah!
But I heard they all left in 2002. They all marched out of Rare single file in protest of the Microsoft buyout and never looked back. And then made Platonic 1.5 decades later. They waited. They waited and made Platonic in 2014 because they wanted to wait 12 years.
Of course, if you don't realize this, the people at Platonic, a lot of them worked on Nuts and Bolts too. So there is not this like sharp bifurcation of like how we got Nuts and Bolts. Nuts and Bolts was the original Banjo team: Greg Mayles, Chris Sutherland, Ed Bryan, down the list.
Nuts
there.
and Bolts had more of the original team than Yooka-Laylee did.
Yeah,
Yooka-Laylee had
kind of.
most of the Nuts and Bolts team as is, but it was missing Greg Mayles and...
This isn't also going to be, Yooka-Laylee what didn't scratch this itch. So, like, we're not going to be like, I like Yooka-Laylee, it's...
I said mean things about Yooka-Laylee on my last episode, but I like the game. I was just being hyperbolic for some reason.
For an indie title made to capture the spirit of Banjo-Kazooie, Yooka-Laylee does a lot right.
I probably have more issues with it than I do any of the 3 Banjo games, but I don't hate Yooka-Laylee. I just want to make that clear after what I said last time.
Yeah, I like Yooka-Laylee. I like Nuts and Bolts. So the thing is, whenever anybody talks about a new Banjo game, they're thinking it more along the lines of a direct successor to the first 2. And that's kind of an interesting problem when you consider they're probably thinking more along the lines of the original Banjo-Kazooie, because Banjo-Tooie did a lot different than Banjo-Kazooie did. Banjo-Tooie, you talk about how much bigger it was, how the worlds were interconnected, and in a lot of ways it played a lot more slower and more methodical than the original Banjo-Kazooie ever did. So would a Banjo-Threeie then follow the Tooie formula? Would it go back a little bit like Yooka-Laylee did and try to capture more of the spirit of the original game? And what about the people who have become Nuts and Bolts aficionados? Like, that was such a radical leap in a different direction for the series. Would you be able to get them on board with a more back to basics Banjo game? How do you do a Banjo sequel that doesn't feel like it's just going backwards? How do you drive that forward momentum with the series and please everyone? That is the weird thing about a Banjo game, because we have never had 2 Banjo games that have felt very, very similar in tone. The closest is Kazooie and Tooie, and they're not that close. And then, of course, we've had the Game Boy Advance games and the mobile games, the whole Grunny's Revenge line of games, they were top-down platformers. You had Banjo Pilot, which is just a weird kind of aberration that was supposed to be a Diddy Kong Racing follow-up, and then it was supposed to be voxel 3D graphics, and then that blew up every Game Boy Advance they tried to play it on. So you get this weird karting game in planes, but there's no reason for them to be in planes. And so anyway, the point is, Banjo has never remained stagnant and has never been just this one thing. Banjo-Threeie, what the hell would Banjo-Threeie actually be? And now more than ever, I feel like we haven't seen this level of this amount of people wanting a new Banjo-Kazooie game since those days of the buyout era, before they rolled out that Banjo is Back trailer completely ignoring what the game is going to be, but it was Banjo and Kazooie running out into that gorgeously rendered Spiral Mountain, and that was where the teaser ended, and you're like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Completely, no vehicles in that first preview trailer. So, things have kind of built back up again, and a lot of that has to do with nostalgia. The nostalgia for the Nintendo 64 era has been steadily building these last 3 to 4 years, and it didn't exist even when Nuts and Bolts came out. The only people nostalgic for the N64 era were weirdos like us on DK Vine. So we're now at a point where like critical mass is being reached. The reactor is ready to blow, and at some point soon, I really feel like Microsoft is going to have to say, we've got to do a new Banjo game. The demand for it is just off the charts, and now is the time to strike. If we're ever going to do it, we've got to do it now.
Yeah. A lot of people seem to think Microsoft are the ones neglecting the Banjo-Kazooie IP, but I get the impression more that Rare is really protective of it, and if they weren't so protective, Microsoft probably would have got a third party on it by now.
I think there's especially since Phil Spencer came on board, there is a healthy level of respect and dialogue with Rare. It's not just that Microsoft wants to run out with their cock out and say, let's make a new Banjo game. We're doing it. You can't stop us. I think they really do respect Rare. Phil Spencer obviously respects Rare, and they don't want to do anything wrong. I think Young Conquer was the closest we've come to them kind of stepping in it a little bit and going outside of Rare's wishes, because you don't really hear anything about Young Conquer, and Rare certainly has not really promoted Young Conquer at all for the HoloLens, which are still not commercially available, by the way. But Rare certainly has promoted Killer Instinct. They've promoted Conker's Big Reunion, that Team Dakota did for Project Spark, and the new Battletoads game. So
the new Battletoads game, I don't know if you know this, but that is actually a Rare project. Like, the Battletoads project was pitched to Craig Duncan, and it's being managed by Rare rather than Microsoft Studios like Killer Instinct is. So, yeah, the hierarchy there actually is Dlala Studios working under Rare.
Yes.
Rather than Killer Instinct, where it was more Rare was sort of helping, but they weren't totally involved.
Yeah, so that's actually opens up the possibilities even more for how a new Banjo game could come about if Rare doesn't want to do it. And I've kind of got like several tiers in my mind of how this would work. And what would be the best case scenario. So, first of all, we should just bring this up. Would we even want a new Banjo game if Greg Mayles didn't want any part of it? And I know we've basically built Greg Mayles up to be this god-tier designer in games, but I mean, I'm a Greg Mayles fan. When you look at my favorite games of all time, they're all Greg Mayles games, and that's not to diminish the contributions of the rest of the team, everybody else who worked. I mean, I'm a fan of all of those people, but there is something about Greg Mayles' design philosophies that just syncs up with the way my brain works so much. And when I'm playing a Greg Mayles game, the joy I feel. It's just this world I want to live in, and I want to visit, and I want to just vacation in. And that's what playing a Greg Mayles game is. Donkey Kong Country 2, the original Banjo-Kazooie, Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Yeah, I'll say it. Grabbed by the Ghoulies is in my top 4 games of all time. Fight me. I don't give a shit. I will take you out. Grabbed by the Ghoulies is a classic, and I will die. I will be buried and still muttering this 6 feet under. Actually, I want to be cremated, so my ashes will be clanging against the urn, saying, Grab by the Ghoulies is one of the best designed games of all time. Fuck you for not appreciating it. And Sea of Thieves. They're my top 4 games of all time.
Yeah, my life in gaming is doing a series on YouTube called Rare After Nintendo. I don't know if they've posted their Viva Pinata video yet. That game will probably take a while to cover. But they are playing all of the Microsoft-era Rare games, the console ones, not the Game Boy ones yet, in order. And he went into Ghoulies like, oh yeah, I don't think this is going to be good. But when he played through Ghoulies, he loved it, and he has mentioned how much he liked it in every video on Rare he's made since then.
You know, people say, this is a little bit of a tangent, but people say, well, if Ghoulies had actually come out on a GameCube, it probably would have done better. Yeah, probably would have. I don't know if it would have gotten any respect still. Because at that point, there was kind of this snobbery towards Rare from the tastemakers of Nintendo fandom, I guess. And there was this weird backlash towards Rare that started around 2000, but really kind of it reached this plateau around 2002, before the buyout even happened, though. And it's kind of forgotten about now, but yeah, I mean, even before the buyout, there's this weird kind of friction between Nintendo loyalists and the Rare fans, who were obviously, Nintendo gamers, because that's how you played Rare at the time. So I don't know if Ghoulies would have done too much better on the GameCube. It certainly would have moved more units, because at that point the Xbox certainly was the frat bro system. It was the full-on, I'm chugging beers up my asshole, I've got a funnel, and I'm chugging beers up there to get drunk super fast because I'm a shitty-ass dude, bro, and I've got no concept of what it means to have actual enjoyment out of my life. So it's all revolves around alcohol and sexual harassment. But that was the Xbox then, the early Xbox. I think they've done a great job at diversifying since Phil Spencer came on board in particular. But since Phil Spencer took over, I should say.
The early 360 era was pretty diverse. They were trying to get like JRPGs and stuff. The Viva Pinata games were heavily marketed then. And I guess everything you said about Ghoulies, I would probably say about the Viva Pinata games. I love them and put them on the same pedestal I put Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie on.
Yeah, Viva Pinata, I think it's just more of a kind of a... It's actually a little bit like Sea of Thieves, and it's more of a tranquil experience. It's more of a live this world kind of thing, rather than like this small little gaming experience that's just this shot of adrenaline. It's more like, come spend some time in the Rare Archipelago, and that's what Sea of Thieves is for me. But anyway, so Greg Mayles, Western Miyamoto is what we call him, and I certainly think it's apt. I think he's brilliant, and I just love the way his brain works. Greg Mayles has done every console Banjo game. Kazooie, Tooie, and Nuts and Bolts. And I love Grunny's Revenge. I adore Grunny's Revenge, as we talked about on the Spotlight episode I did with Nick back in September, maybe, I think, yeah. So you can do Banjo without Greg Mayles. You can, and it can feel like Banjo, and it can create lots of happy memories. But it just seems... It's something we haven't been faced with, a console Banjo game without Greg Mayles. So, in short answer, can you do a Banjo game without Greg Mayles? Yes. But I would at least hope he would consult for it. Like, he doesn't need to be the lead designer. He doesn't need to have creative control. But you certainly want to pick the man's brain. I think he did a little bit of that in Country 3. Just as kind of this, casual thing. And so I think you definitely want to use his brain. look, if Greg Mayles doesn't want to do another Banjo game, I would never want him to do another Banjo game. Because I want him to do what he creatively is interested in. Because he's never let me down.
He has said he has one more Banjo-Kazooie game left in him, so...
Yeah, so I remember back when I visited Rare in 2015, and
2016.
I remember lots of people... 2016, yeah, sorry. The years just roll by now, Shane. They have no meaning. I've hit 35. There's no... I'm facing that urn closer and closer each day, and it's all becoming just this one big lump of time that's just fading into the past. I remember lots of people like approaching him on that trip and just saying, I love Banjo-Kazooie was my jam. I love Banjo-Kazooie. He's a very humble guy, so he's you can't go up to him and say, I think you're God, and it's just weird in general. So I remember him saying very, very clearly, I'm very nearly 20 years older now, and I don't know what I would even say with a new Banjo game. Like I've grown, and I don't know, I don't know where I would even approach that. And so that stuck with me because, we just think of these creators as the people who create what we love, but they've got to be interested in it too. And I would never want somebody chained at their desk churning out a game against their will, because then we get into all of the shitty practices of these major studios who have to churn out this yearly product, and it just becomes an assembly line, and you lose that kind of auteur vision that something like this should really entail. So
I think part of the issue is Nintendo is really good at reinvigorating their IPs. Like, every new Mario game, every new Zelda game, they'll have their detractors, but they generally are super creative, and it just feels like at Nintendo there's a lot of mentorship that I don't get the impression happens as much at Rare. Like, people are allowed to go in their own direction, maybe to a fault at Rare. And most Banjo-Kazooie fans are Nintendo fans, so they're sort of used to the Nintendo way of doing things, where new hirees are sort of groomed to sort of be the next Miyamoto or Tezuka or Aonuma.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the internal practices at Rare, but I would imagine that there's probably more of that mentorship now than there was back in the days of Nintendo and back in those early buyout eras where you had the different teams just continually stumbling trying to get something out. The saga of Saberman Stampede. I think
as much as the internal competition at Rare may have been good for some games, I almost wonder if keeping the whole studio fractured back then was kind of a bad thing.
It worked for the time. The problem was the times changed, and you look back at the buyout era, and they should have done away with that logic and that internal drive, that way to motivate your employees. It no longer applied in that era of gaming.
Rare essentially was a bunch of different studios all called Rare that made really different games.
Yeah, and they were great games because of that internal competition. But I'll take it back to the White Album, Shane. Here we go. That whole Beatles tangent served a purpose. Rare of that era reminds me of the Beatles' White Album, when you had 3 artists and Ringo at the height of their creative talents, and they were all being driven by their growing hatred for each other. So they were trying to outdo one another, and so they were still a band, they were still the Beatles, but they were essentially 3 solo artists and Ringo trying to outdo one another, and so you would get John and Paul, like they were just going through the fucking gamut of every genre of music available to them at the time, and just churning out like all of these insane songs, but they weren't the same band. It wasn't just a cohesive band, and they weren't really working for the band's benefit. They were trying to get one over on the other, and then they would occasionally write something for Ringo. So, with all due respect to Don't Pass Me By, Ringo's first alleged solo composition. Don't know how much George actually penned of that one. I know he penned Octopus's Garden. But, where were we? Yeah, so that was rare at the time, but I think now there is a lot, by design, there's teamwork, there is cohesion at Rare, and there's probably a lot, with the design team, a lot more mentorship. I'm sure Greg has passed on a lot of his philosophy to the rest of the team. It's too soon to say, but I would say that for sure I could see Rare kind of following the Nintendo way, the current Nintendo way of doing things more so now, especially that they've all been working on Sea of Thieves for the most part, and going forward, I could see a lot more of that kind of passing on what you have learned, Yoda-esque philosophy.
I hope so.
So ideally, you said Rare is protective of Banjo, and I do think more so than any other franchise, Banjo is their baby. Banjo is what people associate as Rare's Mario now, you know? And that's just a benefit of they still own it, you know, unlike Donkey Kong. And it really has kind of proven to be this enduring thing that the people who, like Greg Mayles and a lot of the people who made it or worked on it, were there for such a long time. Greg Mayles is still there, and it's just proven to be this touchstone of a game that even Nintendo now is clearly inspired by when you look at Super Mario Odyssey. So obviously Banjo-Kazooie was inspired by Super Mario 64, but now Banjo-Kazooie is fed back into the Mario series, and we've got the inspiration going both ways. So, like, more so than Conquer, because Chris Seaver left, more so than Perfect Dark, because, you know, Free Radical and all of that. Banjo is their baby, and, you know, Battletoads is this IP that obviously is valuable to them, but it's kind of this earlier thing almost, and so ideally, I would want Rare to make it. And it's fine if they let other people take a crack at their properties. Like, I loved Conker's Big Reunion. The new Killer Instinct Cameron is a huge fan of the new Killer Instinct. And I'm looking forward to see what's done with Battletoads. But my thinking is this. And I want to be very, very careful in how I phrase this, because I don't want to give people the wrong impression. If Rare doesn't do the next Banjo game, then I think Rare might run the risk of actually losing a lot of their brand identity. Because when people think of Rare, they think of those games from the Nintendo era, and they've gotten a lot of new fans with Sea of Thieves, sure, obviously, but I still think that Rare logo, that idea of Rare is so in tune with 1994 through 2002, and at the heart of that now is Banjo-Kazooie. And I don't want Rare to be just that shitty IP assembly line. In my younger days, absolutely, I would have wanted them to be. I would have wanted a new Banjo game every year, a new Donkey Kong game every year, a new Conker game every year. Give me more of that. But I can kind of see the Matrix code now. I can kind of see, like, behind the scenes, and I don't want people to make games they don't want to make. And that's why I'm a kind of appreciative of Nuts and Bolts. That was the game they wanted to make then, so...
Wait, but Hyle, that 4chan post said it was a different project under Microsoft that was forced upon them.
I'd only want Rare to do Banjo-Threeie if and when they wanted to. But then again, Shane, the clock is ticking. There won't always be this much demand for a Banjo-Kazooie game. If they wait too long, the nostalgia for it will fade. They've got to kind of strike while the iron is hot, and the iron is red fucking hot right now. Get those wrinkles out, Rare.
Yeah, I think their next project should be Banjo-Kazooie. I think their next project is going to be Banjo-Kazooie. They almost hinted at it back when they were announcing all the 20th anniversary stuff. In the little write-up Lee did, he said they're not ready to announce a new game just yet.
Yeah, but I feel like that's just what you have to say because they know the hordes on Twitter are going to... Like, you just talk about Banjo and people are... You talk about anything and people are typing Banjo-Threeie, 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 Banjo-Threeie. So you bring up the 20th anniversary of Banjo-Kazooie and that's all you're going to get. Like, it's... I don't envy...
The 20th anniversary was the perfect time to bring Banjo back. Yeah. They should have had a development team aim for an arbitrary birthday. It worked for Sonic.
I really feel sorry for the whole community team at Rare. Just like they can be talking about whatever. They can be talking about charity. Yeah, they do a lot of work with special effect which is the charity, but then every time they tweet about it, it's Banjo-Threeie, Banjo-Threeie. So I can see why they would kind of try to stave that off by saying, we're not ready to announce a new game just yet, and then hopefully that will satisfy the hordes. But I don't know, like it's tricky because I don't want them to have to do this against their will. When we had Craig Duncan on the show last year, and we brought up a new Banjo game, and Craig said, if they don't have anything they want to say, they don't want to make a game. And of course, then that, was then taken out of context by major gaming sites like IGN. And then, that was a whole kerfluffle. But I don't know, like now's the time. Their brand identity is so wrapped up in Banjo. So Shane, help me out here. I'm going in circles.
I guess we should start talking about what we want from Banjo-Threeie.
So, okay, let's imagine a new Banjo game is coming. So, let's just get this out of the way. All right. So, best case scenario. Rare makes it and Greg Mails is just brimming with new ideas and wants to be part of the process. Sweet, hot shit. The game is afoot. All right. A good scenario would be Rare makes it, but it's a new, a completely fresh team doing it. Hey, still great. Hey, great. A goodish scenario would be another studio makes it, but with Rare overseeing it, like Battletoads. Fine. An okay, but barely worthy of any hype scenario would be Rare has no real part to play in it and fully cedes control of Banjo-Kazooie to another studio. I don't think that's something anybody wants to see. So let's just pretend like that's never gonna happen. So let's just say like one of the first 3 scenarios that I just mentioned is happening, and we get a new Banjo-Kazooie game, Banjo-Threeie or whatever the hell you want to call it. Banjo-Kazooie blank, but with a reversible cover that says Banjo-Threeie. Everybody's happy. All right. So Shane, what should the storyline be? So here's... Because I sat down with this episode concept, and I was thinking, I've never really considered what the storyline of Banjo-Threeie should be, or the next Banjo-Kazooie game should be, because Nuts and Bolts was incredibly, and I mean incredibly meta, and it deconstructed the fuck out of the series, so much so that it almost broke things. I mean, I'm not even talking about the character of Log or anything. I just mean it almost took things to the point of no return, because Nuts and Bolts' storyline and humor was, it felt like it was this end of the road sentiment that the team and Rare itself seemed nihilistic about not only the future of Banjo, but their own future as a studio. And they were just very down on the types of games they were making because they thought nobody was interested anymore. So a lot of the humor of Nuts and Bolts was just centered around nobody wanting platformers anymore, how badly the game was going to sell, and how much failure the team had seen since the move to Xbox. Obviously, the shadow of Grab by the Ghoulies loomed large. Even after Pinata, there was a lot of despair left over from Grab by the Ghoulies' failure. So, the humor, the game started with Banjo-Kazooie fat and out of shape, and just it just felt there's this finality to Nuts and Bolts when you look back on it, and how do you pick that up 10 years later? Because Nuts and Bolts, honestly, it feels like it could be the finale of Banjo-Kazooie. That's it. Even ignoring Banjo-Kazooie's appearance in #IDARB, which of course every Banjo-Kazooie fan has played and adheres to as canon. So even ignoring that, it feels like Nuts and Bolts was, in some respects, the end, because it was thought of as the end. So where do you pick that up?
Well, a lot of people think that spoilers for the end of Nuts and Bolts. Grunty said, wait till you see the game I make. And people think the next game is going to be like something that Grunty specifically made to mess with Banjo.
Yeah, so I don't think that's a very good place to take it. And I'll say my piece here about Nuts and Bolts. I love Nuts and Bolts. Unabashedly, I do love it now. But I still take issue with the artifice of Nuts and Bolts. The fact that every world but Showdown Town was a set. It was fake. There was nothing. You had the Banjo-Kazooie extended cast playing parts in these sets, and the joy of Rare's world building is that you love to visit their fictional archipelago. You want to see more of it. You want to learn more details about it. And Nuts and Bolts didn't provide a lot of that. So, while Banjo Land was full of great references, it was still fake. It was a construct by log. So having a video game, or having this concept of Gruntilda made this video game, and does she trap Banjo-Kazooie in a video game? I don't know, but I think it needs to take place in the reality of the world of Banjo-Kazooie. So I was, like I said, I haven't really come up with an idea for a Banjo-Kazooie sequel until this week. And, that's so weird because I've got so many ideas for Donkey Kong sequels. I got my big idea for the Conker sequel, which is just Dante's Inferno, or really, because I'm such a low-class fraud, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. And I've got ideas for even where to take, Star Fox franchise maybe, but Banjo, I don't know, man. It was like I've never really considered that, and maybe just because I just trust Greymail so much, it's like whatever. But I was like thinking today and earlier this week, where do you pick up? And Nuts and Bolts, I feel like the next Banjo game would have to be reflective of where Nuts and Bolts ended. But it would also have to comment on where nostalgia has now taken us, with 3D platformers in a renaissance, the Banjo-Kazooie characters suddenly beloved by so many people, and the demand for them at an all-time high. So if Nuts and Bolts represented this absolute low point in Rare's IPs and where they were feeling as a studio and their place in a video game industry, this next Banjo game, well, acknowledging nuts and bolts would have to then be the complete flip side of that. So let's have some fun with that. So my idea is that in the next Banjo game, and by the way, I in no way like anticipate or actually want to see this happen, but this is just my idea. If I were in any way creatively involved in the next Banjo game, this would be my pitch. Have Banjo-Kazooie's life and adventures turned into some sort of in-universe movie or a Rare Archipelago-based streaming service show. So whatever the equivalent of Netflix would be in the Rare Archipelago. Have Banjo-Kazooie's adventures be adapted and have them all of a sudden be huge celebrities, and with all these fans now that didn't exist in the universe before, bugging them about when their next adventure is going to be. So turn this demand about Banjo-Threeie into a driving point of the plot. All these people are bugging them. When are you going to go on a new adventure? We want a new season of this Banjo-Kazooie show. So that's the initial kernel of an idea. If we're going to get meta with it again and acknowledge nuts and bolts happened, then that's where I would pick up with it. And Banjo-Kazooie have never been like huge celebrities in the world of the Donkey Kong universe or the shared Rare universe. So that's how I would get around that. Have their life story be optioned for some sort of TV show and or Netflix type show, and then go from there. And so then I was thinking, okay, well then who brought Banjo-Kazooie's world to life as a TV show? And I thought maybe the showrunner of this in-universe Banjo series should be an established character. I basically decided Jolly Roger would be perfect for that. So, in Nuts and Bolts, Jolly Roger became the Jolly Dodger. He became this kind of criminal type. And so what if he had another transformation? What if Jolly Roger adapts a new identity with every console game going forward? So, since Jolly Roger would be going Hollywood, you could call him Holly Todger. And Todger is slang for a penis. Shane, in case you didn't realize that.
I did not.
So, because Hollywood could be taken as a euphemism for the penis, because then Holly Todd. It's not great, by the way, this idea. I'm just sharing it, but that's a respectable pun, right? That's at least on par with DK Vine or the Kongversation. I will take your silence to mean absolutely, Hyle. Keep going with this. So, meanwhile, Gruntilda is still working in Log's video game factory, but she's completely broke. She has been toiling away in Log's video game factory. I don't know, she's been making like Madden football year in and year out, or some sort of equivalent. Maybe some sort of kickball game to tie into Banjo-Tooie. And maybe, I don't know, Jingling could be the John Madden type figure in this franchise. But she's been toiling away, and she sees Banjo-Kazooie now have all of this fame, and she has not gotten any cut of the royalties, despite being a major character in this Netflix type show. And so she's stuck working in Log's factory. By the way, this would be the only time Log appears in the game, because I feel like Log would just break things too much to keep continually using him. So acknowledge Log, but let's not actually bring him back as a major driving force in this game. Gruntilda decides she needs to get with the times. Being on a video game assembly line is not the way to do it. She wants to start her own true crime podcast, Shane. But she needs a hook. She needs a crime to really cash in on this fad. And so she's got to come up with one, and that crime is who killed Banjo-Kazooie. So she is going to attempt to murder Banjo-Kazooie and then profit off of it as a way to get her share of their newfound fame. This is just my idea, by the way. I am not married to this, nor do I want to actually see this made manifest. So, all right. Yeah, who killed Banjo-Kazooie? Well, it's going to be Gruntilda if she can get away with it. So, she abducts Banjo-Kazooie, and she takes them to the island where their streaming biopic is filmed. And I figured this could be the Hollywood of the Rare Archipelago. So that way, you can mix the best of both worlds. You can have... You can have some sets and homages to different genres that are completely, like, fake, but it's all firmly set in the real Rare Archipelago with natural environments throughout and not a facsimile of worlds like Nuts and Bolts was. So just take it away from the Idle Hags, take it away from Spiral Mountain. You can have a bit set in Spiral Mountain at the beginning, per tradition, but let's take it to a completely new island and really just let the creativity flow. So, do you have any ideas for how you would do it?
Not so many ideas for the storyline. I like the idea that it would be sort of the opposite of Nuts and Bolts, and now Banjo and Kazooie are totally in demand.
Well, I'm glad you like that idea. All right, well, let's talk about how the game will be structured then. Obviously, Tooie, I marvel at what Banjo-Tooie did, but it was a little bit daunting, I think, in a lot of respects. They maybe overdid their ambitions with Tooie.
Maybe.
In a lot of ways, it felt very, very different from Banjo-Kazooie. There is this elegance and simplicity with Banjo-Kazooie. And I don't want them to go back to that. I want them to actually shoot for the moon with this. But I think they've got to... Not only have they got to take into account Tooie, but they've got to take into account Yooka-Laylee and especially Super Mario Odyssey. So we brought this came up before on the conversation, and the idea of an open world sandbox game like, say, Grand Theft Auto
Or Breath of the Wild.
Or Breath of the Wild, but as a 3D platformer.
That is where I was gonna go with this.
Have it be set on this massive island, but have it be completely open. You could structure it, different ways to break it up, but it's not going to be like Tooie where you have the strict linear, and obviously you've got to incorporate jiggies and all of that, so I guess there would be some level of unlocking as you progress, but I don't know. What do you think? Like, should we just forget the whole jiggy system, or should jiggies actually go towards something else?
Oh yeah, that's true. I was thinking your unlockable moves would unlock more areas of the map, but yeah, the jiggies might not fit into this idea.
Jiggies could all go towards... I mean, I know there's some romanticism with the idea of you can do anything from the start, including fight the final boss. You're probably going to get your ass kicked, but you could do it. But maybe jiggies could all go towards the end game, but you can do pretty much everything else. So you collect jiggies along the way, but the whole world is an open sandbox, besides maybe the final element of it. Maybe would that be too much of a cheat, or I don't know. Again, I'm not as good of a designer as Greg Mayles, so I just admire what he does. So, but yeah, I think an open world sandbox, you could parse out...
It's something sort of like Tooie, but with, less hallways in between the levels?
Yeah, I think, imagine Tooie, but with the actual barriers and restrictions lifted. So, what Tooie was trying to emulate, but for real.
Yeah, not as massive... Definitely not as massive as, the world map for Breath of the Wild, though. I'd want it to be smaller and more compact. But
yeah, probably. But I would love a game where you could just explore as Banjo-Kazooie, and you could just wander aimlessly and not even be working towards getting jiggies, but just have a good time running around the world from start to back again.
I think a really good way to sort of bring the original Banjo-Kazooie magic back would be to have trails of notes, not just have the notes that are all bundled up like in Tooie. But I think these trails of notes should sort of respawn, not to be recollected. Like, if you got a note you've already gotten, it wouldn't add to your total, but sort of like faded out notes would be there if you want to follow the path like another direction.
Yeah, that's a possibility, because that is the downside to especially the XBLA versions of Banjo-Kazooie. Going back into the world, like, there was an upshot to the notes respawning, and that was that they were directional markers. So the fact that the game now saves every note you collect means you lose a lot of clues, essentially, and also you can kind of like lose track a little bit of where you're supposed to be. That was something. I understand why they did it for the XBLA versions.
Yeah, why not take all the challenge out of the game?
Yeah, I liked that you had to collect all the notes in one go. Like that it was hard, but games should be a little hard sometimes, people. Well, I like that we're both on the same page as far as the sandbox goes, and I'm sure we'll get some callers who might disagree or have their own suggestions in a little bit. But I'm looking in our live stream chat right now, just seeing what some people are saying here. I've got amazing DJ Dustin and just Andre talking back and forth here. So DJ Dustin says, one idea I had was that Gruntilda took parts of their real world and used her magic to suck it into a video game, since she couldn't be arsed to actually make it. So kind of like a Brainiac from off of Superman thing, where she's sucking worlds into bottles, but the bottle is a video game. If they did the video game thing. Yeah, I could see that.
She sucked worlds into bottles?
No, not the mole. No. Although I would be totally down if the whole game took place inside Bottle's body to further humiliate him. He lost his whole family after his resurrection, so let's just get inside and see Bottles from head to toe, inside and out. Let's just completely expose him to the world. Andre says, Bottles inside story. Yeah. Andre says, it would have to be Banjo-Kazooie is like Mario in that it needs honest-to-God, meticulous level design wherever you turn, and there's no way they could pull that off in a world the size of Breath of the Wild. Yeah,
that's why I said it would be much smaller and more compact.
But I also want it to be more ambitious than Super Mario Odyssey, and because I want Banjo to retake the crown. When Banjo-Kazooie came out, it like punched Super Mario 64 in the jaw and said, no, this is how you do it. And I want Banjo to come back and say, this is how you do 3D platforming in 2019 or 2020. Bam! This is Banjo style, baby. And I don't know why Banjo is so abusive towards poor Mario, but it makes me happy because I have issues, probably from my lack of love and or breastfeeding. Shane? That being said, so we both can agree on an open world sandbox of some sort. Kind of evocative of Tooie's world, but with
less barriers. And
less barriers.
Maybe more ways to traverse. I would maybe want Kazooie...
Vehicles?
I would want Kazooie's gliding to maybe be more reminiscent of Spyro's gliding, or the glider you get in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, sure.
I like Kazooie, you tap A again, it sort of parachutes you down for a bit, but in a game that's a bigger sandbox game, I feel like the ability to glide even with Banjo would help a lot.
I don't know, like, the fine details of how I would handle things, especially like with movesets in this
maybe
in this expansive world.
It would be like the shoes you get in Kazooie or Tooie, but it would be a different item, like an energy drink or something that allows Kazooie to be able to do that for a certain period of time.
Moss Soup Swills, soup cans. Not really, but, you know, I expect a healthy share of Ghoulies references. Because we haven't gotten them in Sea of Thieves yet, and that makes me angry. That makes me angry, Shane. I want to talk a little bit about the cast.
Oh, yeah, me too. I think
Banjo-Kazooie absolutely need to be in it.
I don't know if I would want the cast to expand too much, especially since Steve Mails probably wouldn't be designing new characters and they might feel out of place.
Yeah, I would want new characters and old characters. I would want a healthy mix, but I definitely would want to lean more on old favorites coming back. But I don't know. You could do, if this was like a whole like sprawling island setting, then I see no reason why you couldn't just have a lot of just NPCs and a lot of characters you could talk to for fan service sake, and also new characters as well. You would almost have to be new characters.
I have a lot of Jinjos, a lot of those pigs.
Well, I've already made my case for Jolly Roger, but Gruntilda would obviously be the main or a major antagonist. So how would you bring Gruntilda back? We brought this came up a little bit a few weeks ago, but what will Gruntilda look like in the next Banjo game? Because I would want her to continue the degradation. It would be a major mistake for her to return somehow to being just the regular green witch of Banjo-Kazooie. Like let's have her be a brain in a jar or something like that. Like I want her to be worse off than she was in Nuts and Bolts.
I don't know exactly how I would do it, but I agree with you.
Like the Bomar monks from off of Star Wars. She could be a brain in a jar on spider legs or something. With a witch's hat on top, of course, just so you know it's Gruntilda. But yeah, just get weird with it. It doesn't really matter what Gruntilda looks like. I know people are attached probably to either her original or her Banjo-Tooie appearance, but I like that. Unlike K. Rool, she is actually physically bound to her new forms because she's decomposing. She's lost her body. She's whatever. Like you could even have her skull get cracked open or something at the beginning of the game and have that be a visual explanation of why she's now in a new form. But absolutely, yeah. Just make sure there is kind of this escalation or degradation with Gruntilda. I thought that her Nuts and Bolts look was too similar to Grunny's Revenge. Like it was basically just a robot body, but with the skull and a jar. And I don't know. I mean, I'm appreciative of it. I'm appreciative that she didn't revert or anything, but I'd kind of want to take it to more extremes than that. Mumbo and Humba, Shane.
Oh.
How would we handle this?
Humba is a tricky one.
Well, you mean as far as just her being a stereotype?
Oh, yeah.
I thought Nuts and Bolts kind of slowly walked that back a little bit. Just don't have her speak in the broken English, the big heap shit. Like, let's just have her be a person who happens to be of Native American descent, but don't have her. She doesn't have to be sitting in a teepee. She doesn't have to have a feather. You know, she could just be Humba Wumba, a shaman who happens to be of Native American descent. Like it kind of like Taj. They kind of backed away from the more like ludicrously stereotypical. Like they nixed the Indian accent in Diddy Kong Racing DS, and I would argue like you just get an actual Indian person to voice Taj, and you've gone a long way towards solving the problem there. But
yeah.
With Humba, yeah, just kind of don't have her be the way she was portrayed in Tooie.
Speaking of voice acting, we would keep the mumble speak, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's non-negotiable. You have to have the mumble speak. Of course, would you like get Chris Sutherland and the rest back in the studio? Like, would you reach out to the people at Playtonic now and say, hey, would you at least be a part of this? I don't know. Like, probably. Like, why not? Like, they got those guys for the Rare Replay documentaries.
That would depend on how easy it would be to just port the old mumble speak from the N64 games, because it might not be necessary.
True, but I think it would be more in good faith to actually bring them in to record new stuff. Just it shows that the family is still together, you know, and you're not just
yeah.
You're not just cashing in on
Like,
their
I
past
was
work
thinking,
and-
like, they could record for new characters if that could sort of be a middle
sure,
ground.
sure. That would
Because
be,
the
that would be
original
fine.
Mumblespeak is kind of iconic. I'm not sure I would want to get rid of it, but we could get sort of send invitations to the extended Rare family and let them know we need a bunch of new character voices, which I guess would go against what I said earlier about not having too many new characters.
Yeah. But as far as Mumbo and Humba go, I wouldn't have like Mumbo be playable again. Well, let's just have them together doing transformations or something. Use them both, but for the same purpose. Or I don't know. Like I feel like Mumbo lost a lot when he was taken from his role as the one who transforms you, and they tried to expand on his popularity by making him playable. And
He kind of got his old role back in Nuts and Bolts.
yeah, but then Humba was just a cast member in the worlds, and I think I'd want her to do more than just that. So just have them be married at this point. Like, I don't know. Like, have them finally put aside their differences and combining their magical abilities to make the best transformations ever.
We could have
I don't
Humba do the transformations and have Mumbo do Mumbo's garage again.
I wouldn't be opposed if there were some vehicles, if there was some little tip of the hat to Nuts and Bolts. It just couldn't be the focus. It absolutely could not be the focus. It would have to be this kind of ancillary thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to focus on vehicles, and I wouldn't really want them in at all, because to have them in a little bit would probably be way too much work on a vehicle engine that wouldn't even be used.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe like it depends how big the island is. Like, you might want to drive around it. I'm thinking in Grand Theft Auto terms, obviously, but you know.
An idea for this game that Q-Burn and the Master DS have, they were talking about like doing the game as a road trip. So I guess they could incorporate a vehicle if they did that.
You know, think about a road trip, and I don't know the specifics of their idea, but would a road trip be too linear of an idea?
I think so. I would not want to do a road trip for that reason.
Like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is essentially a road trip game.
Yeah.
Minus the road, but I think that works for a 2D platformer, but not so much a 3D platformer that's trying to expand and be the biggest 3D platformer that there ever was, ever on any platform. So Bottles. I wouldn't have Bottles in the game, or I would confine Bottles to a cameo appearance. Hear me out, Shane. So I would have Bottles in the game, but I would not have Bottles be the serving in the same role. I would go back to the whole Jam Jars and Bonsai thing. Let's introduce yet another member of the family and have that be the one who teaches you moves. If we go with my idea, have it be a stage combat coach to the stars. Another sibling or some sort of weird cousin, but I would still like maybe have Bottles in there somewhere, but have the main mole character be somebody new.
Sure.
Like I didn't miss Bottles when he was dead in Tooie, and I didn't miss him when we were back in time in Grunny's Revenge, so I won't miss him here. I would hope that Bottles has found some more happiness in his life. If he's not reconciled with his family, then maybe he's started a new life, and hopefully he's not selling religious artifacts on the black market.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would want this game to be as much of a downer as Nuts and Bolts or even Tooie were, so I'd like...
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
I'd like Bottles to be happy. And I guess we have to talk about Tootie.
Do we have to talk about Tootie?
Would Tootie be in the game? Or is she still in Minecraft World? Or they could reference Minecraft World.
Just absolutely reference the Tootie's in Minecraft, and it's fine. And then you also finally like officially confirm, besides cute little references from We Love Day, that the Minecraft shit is canon too. You could have, if we go with my idea, you could have the actress playing Tootie, but it not being actually Tootie. That might be fun. For my idea, for the Netflix premise. Here would be my twist ending. I would say Grunty isn't the final villain of the game. You fight Grunty at the end, but she's not the final. Maybe can be. You can fight Grunty from the start, but by collecting all the Jiggies, you get to the actual true boss of the game. And that is, you find out that the events of the game, Grunty herself, it's all been manipulated this whole time by the actors playing Banjo-Kazooie in this TV show. They want Banjo and Kazooie dead so they can get away from the roles and avoid being typecast because they want to move on to other projects such as a pirate show. they want to be in something like Sea of Thieves, the TV show. So they want Banjo-Kazooie dead because this demand for a new Banjo-Kazooie adventure is keeping them shackled to Banjo-Kazooie. So you see the meta elements here?
Yeah, I like that.
So the final battle, therefore, could be Banjo-Kazooie versus, in quotes, Banjo-Kazooie, which I think would be really, really weird and trippy. You could even
with the evil Banjo and Kazooie, they would have big vehicle contraptions and stuff. I'm guessing.
That could come into play a little bit, maybe. Whatever they used as on-set props for the nuts and bolts season of the show. I don't know, but you can even do a tip of the hat to Yooka-Laylee here. I wouldn't want the game to cast shade on Yooka-Laylee to have any digs at Yooka-Laylee. That I don't think that would be cool. But, you could even, have fun, homaging or referencing Yooka-Laylee a little bit. Just how, the demand for Banjo-Kazooie is so much now that, you've got all these properties that are trying to cash in on that. So, I don't know. That's my idea. I just came up with it this week. I'm not married to it. It's not like Conker's Inferno or anything where, I absolutely want to see it. But I think thematically that's where the new Banjo game would have to be. You have to get meta with it, and it has to be a complete tonal polar reversal from Nuts and Bolts. And even Tooie, like you said, Banjo-Kazooie, the series got pretty depressing for a while, and I think we need to kind of shake that off a little bit, but you can still get meta with it, and you can still get cute with it, even have some commentary, God, you guys are just making us make a new Banjo game when we're ready to move on. But gentler than that. You don't want to bash your own fans, but have some fun with it. Have some talk back. Get a little cheeky with it, and I think it would be just the right tone. But anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts.
I guess this is going back to gameplay. Would you want Banjo and Kazooie to be the only playable characters?
Yeah. I think it muddles things too. I liked the idea at the time of Mumbo being playable, but it felt like a chore whenever you would have to do the Mumbo sections, and I feel like the series is Banjo-Kazooie. It's personified by Banjo-Kazooie. It's personified by the moves they do in tandem. I don't even know if I would split them up. I think they should stay together all the time.
I also think they should stay together. But
that was one of the things that again seemed cool about Tooie, but in retrospect, I think might have bogged Tooie down and made it feel the parts of Tooie that did feel a little bit like a slog were where you had to split them up and then go do the thing as one of them, and it was never as fun to play as one of them and not both of them at the same time. And I think it should I think that's where Kazooie got it absolutely right. The first game got it absolutely right. You always want to play as Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should focus on Banjo and Kazooie. I do like this idea that Michael Julius Peterson has, where he thinks they should do sort of a tropical freeze thing, where you could get different buddies that do different things, and like to switch Kazooie out the way Tropical Freeze could switch Diddy out for Dixie or Cranky. But I don't know, maybe for a Banjo-Threeie or 4E, I guess, if we're going with 3E. But if they're going to switch Kazooie out, I feel like they should also be able to switch Banjo out. Like maybe have different mammals and different birds. And
have Boggy Bear as the bear.
I was gonna
in
say
there.
Soggy, actually.
Oh, well, yeah, because those kids would be fully grown adults.
Like
now,
I was thinking, we need a polar bear,
and
then I was thinking, how about a polar bear that's already in the game? How about the female polar bear? Have a lead female character. So that led me to Soggy.
Maybe for a sequel. I think
not for the first like Banjo-Kazooie Returns, but another game down the line, just like Donkey Kong did.
I feel like where it has to get back to basics is in the characters themselves and how you control them. And I feel like it needs to just kind of ignore what Tooie brought to it in that regard. Ignore what Nuts and Bolts brought to it with the vehicle-based stuff. I also
want to say that jam jars should be one of the playable mammals in this case.
Jam jars? What would you do with jam jars?
Well, he would have. I guess it would ruin the E rating, but he would have weapons.
See, I think it would be cool. Like, I do think it would be cool to see like bottles and jam jars, like these masters of these moves, these arcane moves that they've taught you. You've never actually seen them do them for themselves, so it would be kind of trippy to see them capable of doing all of this shit. Just these little mole characters, but I don't know. Maybe some things are best left to the imagination, and maybe after you get everything in a game, that could be your reward. You could play as other characters and just explore the world, and maybe that would be a compromise. But for sure, just keep it to Banjo-Kazooie for 99.9% of the adventure or the entire game, and just save that stuff for a potential Banjo 4E. All right, so we do have a couple calls to take, and also comments left on Twitter, because apparently people were struggling with the hotline today. So let's take our first call of the episode. Luckily we don't have too many calls, because again, people were struggling with the hotline today. I tested it out. The hotline was working fine.
Hello, Kongversation. It is Kevin Folgers, also known as Gothic Teddy Bear. But we're not going to go down the laundry list of different names I have. We'll just be Kevin Folgers for today. So, Banjo-Threeie. That's a funny one. Oh, goodness. What do I personally foresee in a potential Banjo-Threeie? Well, two things. One, I think a new Banjo game is definitely coming sooner than later. It won't be made by Rare, but it'll be supervised by Rare. And I believe that it won't be called Banjo-Threeie. I think it'll be probably something like Banjo and Kazooie and their great trip to the moon, or to China, or the Atlantic Ocean. Who knows? It's going to be a Banjo-Kazooie title. But it's probably going to keep the full name Banjo-Kazooie also.
So Kevin's call cuts out then, and I assumed he was just struck down by Thanos' snap there. But actually, he then sent a message on Twitter, and he said that he apparently the call was going to say, I thought it'd be awesome if a new Banjo could somehow connect with the Rare Replay Banjo titles. So, stop and swap.
If it's possible, I know the Banjo-Kazooie titles are on Xbox One, but they're running in the Xbox 360 virtual machine. I'm not sure exactly if an Xbox One title can grab stuff from the save data of Xbox 360 titles, but if they can get that to work, that'd be perfect. Yeah,
it would. I feel like if they incorporated any stop and swappery, like you couldn't really do it with the first two Banjo games or Nuts and Bolts, like, because that stuff's already, like, I don't know, you can't go back into it. If anything, I'd want them to set something up for the next game.
Well, there was the Stop and Swap 2.
Yeah. I'd want them to do something like actually what fans in our wildest dreams dreamt of Stop and Swap back in a day, like a whole like environment unlockable in this game that's somehow kept out of the hands of people like data mining it. I don't know how you do it.
When the sequel comes out, they could do a title update for this game that adds the world.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Although, like, the whole notion of Stop and Swap loses all of its magic in the modern era when you can do shit like that. Like, part of the charm of Stop and Swap back then was, how the fuck are they going to pull this off? How are you going to go back into the original Banjo-Kazooie? And of course, the answer was a lot simpler than any of us were imagining. Like, I was imagining a lock-on cartridge and this entrance to the lava world rising up in Grunny's lair, and you go through it, and then you're in Tooie, but it feels like you're in Kazooie. I don't know, But absolutely, there's got to be some sort of Stop and Swap 2 or something. And this time, of course, because it is 2018 or 2019 or 2020 or whenever this would be, you're not limited by things like, oh, we rolled out a new wave of N64s and we've gotten rid of the hot swapping, so you're fucked, Rare. You're fucked. Not an issue anymore. Everything is magical now. With the flick of a button, you can do anything. So, sure. But thank you for the call, Kevin. Andrew on Twitter said, I don't have time to call, so I'm giving this to you through Twitter. Hence, the Andrew on Twitter. He said, I posted on the forums with an idea that a Banjo sequel should star Tootie, and similar to DKC2, she has to rescue her brother Banjo from the evil clutches of Grunty's undead sisters, Mingella and Blobelda. Okay. Thank you, Andrew. I think Banjo-Kazooie should absolutely be the focus of the Banjo. People would lose their shit. People would have a conniption if the first new Banjo game in over 10 years did not have Banjo in it. We've finally gotten past all these people complaining about Donkey Kong Country 2 not starring Donkey Kong. That was only 1 year after the original Donkey Kong Country, and people complained about it. Well, I didn't like the sequels because they didn't have Donkey Kong in it. Blah, 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 blah. More than a decade after Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, and having the first new Banjo-Kazooie game and not having Banjo in it, I think people would riot. I think it would be a different sort of Nuts and Bolts, but Nuts and Bolts all over again. So, maybe for a sequel, maybe for Banjo-Threeie, again, then you can get creative with character combinations and everything. Also, I would keep Mingella and Blobelda dead. I really, really like the fact that they're just dead. They're not coming back. Gruntilda killed her sisters. The end. I think it's hilariously dark, and I wouldn't want to disrupt that at all. Enough dead characters have come back, either through resurrections or as ghosts, that I like the idea that they're just gone. Like even George Ice Cube, we make so many jokes about George and Mildred Ice Cube, but even they were implied to have reformed in a new shape in Nuts and Bolts. So keep them dead, in my opinion. If you're a big Mingella and Blobelda fan and you're dying to see them back, I don't want to piss on your dream, Andrew. I really don't. Because we all need dreams. We all need something that gets us up out of bed in the morning and says, I can do this thing called life. I can find the energy somehow, damn it. And if that is an undead Mingella and Blobelda for you, then who am I to get in the way of that? Do you have anything you would like to add about undead Mingella or Blobelda, Shane?
I'm going to be honest, I don't have anything to add.
All right. I do think the cat should come back, though, because I didn't like that the cat died. And the cat should have 9 lives if Batman Returns is any indication. So the cat can come back. Piddles. Or was it Puddles? Which one was from Nuts and Bolts? There's Piddles and Puddles. And one was from Tooie and one was from Nuts and Bolts.
I want to say Piddles was Nuts and Bolts.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So yeah, bring back Puddles. And maybe that can be a secret mode, Piddles and Puddles as Banjo-Kazooie. Because people are really dying for that team up. All right, thank you for I was going to say call, but thank you for the tweet. So we've got an actual second call, a real call, so we'll take that. And then we'll get into our final thoughts for now on Banjo-Threeie. I'm doing finger quotes, but you can't see it. But hopefully the mic will pick up the wind of the finger quotes. Can you hear that? Can you hear the finger quotes, Shane? Banjo-Threeie.
Hey guys, it's Ethan or Bay and the Bear here, and I'm calling it 728, so oh god, I'm gonna try and make this quick. Alright, so Banjo-Threeie, hopefully I can speak about this game a little less embarrassing this time. Oh, that CFE's meltdown. Okay, but one thing I'd like to point out is Greg Mail's tweet, I believe he was asked about it a while back, and he said he'd basically do it kind of like Banjo-Tooie's interconnected world with more Banjo-Tooie style levels, and I think that's a pretty good base to go off of, personally, and I think that's a good base to go off of, and really the core thing I want Banjo-Threeie to do is go off of where Banjo-Tooie left off. I think that game has so much untapped potential. It's worth crying over, and heck, I'd even say that's why and this actually might be something more discussing, potentially making HD remakes of the original game, so there essentially would be no real issue going off where we left off. Heck, who knows, maybe we can even let a new studio take the wheel things if Rare themselves is not really interested in HD remakes, followed by a Banjo-Threeie would be a good way to get things off track. Okay, I'm going now. Bye. Oh God.
Beware of calling in at 7:28 when we're recording at 7:30. God, it's like I put a gun to his head or something. Bam! I played the call. I saw you were calling, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna get him in because I fully expected you to call in. So you didn't have to panic there. But I'm sorry you felt so much stress there. So yeah, this whole HD remake dream that so many people have.
I figured this would come up during this episode, and I kind of alluded to it earlier when I mentioned how Banjo X would go better in this era than it would have a decade ago.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, Ethan has a long record of being really passionate about this idea. I think they should do it. I know you're more iffy than I am.
I'm only iffy because I feel like there's really nothing wrong with the XBLA versions, and I am a traditionalist, and I as much as I like Super Mario All-Stars, I'll never consider them the definitive versions of those games. As much as I find charming things about the Game Boy Advance Donkey Kong Country trilogy, absolutely no way in hell will those ever supplant the originals. You're never going to touch the originals. So my issue is, even though it's in vogue right now, even though it would probably make a lot of money, would that be something, would that be time, money, manpower that could be spent towards something else? Maybe something Banjo related instead, something new.
I would like to see this. I don't think it would have the same problems as the GBA remakes of the DKC trilogy.
Oh yeah, I wasn't bringing those up to say that they would. Obviously they wouldn't. I was just bringing that up to say different versions of the same game are never going to replace the original if you played the original first. It would have the effect of introducing the original games to a new audience, which is what the GBA games did, which is what Super Mario All-Stars did, which is what the Crash Bandicoot trilogy has done. I don't know. Like, personally, I'm not clamoring for it, but I'm not gonna like say no to it if they announce it. I'll be like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, sure. Of course, I'll buy it. I'll buy it on day one. But I could go either way, take it or leave it.
Yeah, I actually do have some issues with the XBLA ports. I'm not gonna go into them here. I kind of went into one of them earlier. The note thing. I like the note thing. I like that they made an easier way to play the game. I just wish you could also play it with the challenge. There's a lot of technical issues with the ports. Especially the sound in Tooie. There's a lot of sound issues. I don't like the font. Yeah, the font was cool at first because it matched Nuts and Bolts' font, but then they changed to Nuts and Bolts' font, so it's inconsistent again. I would like to see the font be turned back. There's a lot of audio glitches in Tooie, like I said. If you've ever played the XBLA version of Tooie with headphones, you would know what I'm alluding to. It's terrible. Kazooie, less so. There's the issue of the piano that comes to mind where every key plays the same note, but this is all just little stuff, ultimately. But yeah, I love the Spyro trilogy. I think they are the definitive versions of the Spyro games, and if something like that could happen for Banjo, that would be perfect. Again, I wouldn't have an issue with it. It's just, I feel like I got burned out on remakes in the mid-aughts, and I've never fully healed from that. Like, instead of getting a completely new Conquer game, we got Conquer Live and Reloaded. We got the XBLA versions, but they came out at the same time as Nuts and Bolts, so it wasn't really... There was never any issue with that, and it was kind of cool at the time, and the GBA, DKC games, and Jungle Beat, New Play Control, which completely botched the whole, like, driving appeal of Jungle Beat when you actually sat down to play it, and you realize that the bongos were damn intuitive with the game they designed, and there's no point to it when you remove the bongo. Anyway, so I want to see it. Sure, I'd want to see. 'Cause I won't say no to it, and I would like to see it if they announced it, but it's not something I'm going to be like praying to Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy to make happen. I'm not going to be pulling out my teeth and shoving them underneath my pillow, bleeding on my pillowcases, hoping that the Tooth Fairy puts it underneath my head in the middle of the night. That's the way games you want, right? You give yourself dental surgery. But if they do it, I hope it's like a Nuts and Bolts thing, and it's concurrent with the new Banjo-Threeie or whatever, so that way it's just kind of like this cool side bonus rather than this main course. So like it could be like the modern equivalent of the XBLA versions, but better, and then maybe you could incorporate Stop and Swap with them, but with 3E, but in a new context. So I don't know. But then I would feel bad that Nuts and Bolts is kind of left out in the cold. And of course, what about Grunny's Revenge? Everybody always forgets Grunny's Revenge. And Banjo Pilot had espresso in it, Shane. Banjo Pilot had espresso. I think it may have been Ethan who brought this up, but this engine that they would develop for the remakes of Kazooie and Tooie could then be used for a Grunty's Revenge remake done in the same 3D platformer style. But then, is that really Grunny's Revenge? Or because I feel like Grunny's Revenge is a top-down game, and that is... Like, you wouldn't remake the original Legend of Zelda, but as a 3D game. I could see why people would find the appeal of that, but then that's not the original Legend of Zelda. That's a fair point. That's a facsimile. That's I don't know. I'm a cranky old 35-year-old man at this point, looking at my time in the urn that's coming. It's coming, Shane. I'll be in that urn before I know it. I guess we never touched upon music. It's not a big part of this at the moment, since we don't know what the situation of the composers will be whenever this happens, but do you think they would try to get Grant Kirkhope back on, or do you think they would go in-house and have Robin Beanland do it? Or Jamie Hughes, he's still at Rare, right? He did Grunty's Revenge soundtrack, and that was pretty good.
it's a tricky situation, and I don't mean the Triceratops / Earthwalker. It would be weird not to reach out to Grant Kirkhope, but at the same time, you've got Robin Beanland, who is a musical chameleon.
Yeah, Robin Beanland's music in Nuts and Bolts, because he did do some of that soundtrack, it sounds like Banjo-Kazooie music. It fits right in with Grant Kirkhope's style.
Yeah, maybe what you would do is have Robin Beanland do the majority of it, but you reach out to Grant Kirkhope, and you do have him compose some pieces to it. So that way you keep the family together, you keep the fans happy, but you're also not ignoring your own in-house salaried head of music, you know? Any other issues to discuss with Banjo-Threeie before we wrap this up? Have we completely exhausted discussion of this? This completely
this
made up
discussion was
hypothetical
exhausted
game.
a long time ago.
I fully understand where the fans are coming from, but I also think, like, we're going to be getting a new Banjo game. There isn't some vast conspiracy to keep Banjo from you or from us. It's not being done out of malice. It's not being done out of spite. It's not being done because they don't know you want it. It's going to happen. It's just
Microsoft
a matter of timing.
knows there's demand for Banjo-Kazooie. But if you look
absolutely.
at the ads for Game Pass, it's Master Chief and Banjo-Kazooie at front and center. They are the two mascots.
Granted, it is the nuts and bolts iteration of Banjo-Kazooie.
It's the newest
which I
art
feel
they
like...
have. It's
I know.
It's like Rare Replay. They just used the most modern art for each character. Oh, yeah, we didn't discuss that. I think it would be designs that look much more like the N64 designs in a new game.
When I was thinking about this, I was definitely not thinking of the nuts and bolts
I don't
designs
think it had
running
to
around.
even be said, to be honest. But
no, it really
the
didn't.
1998 designs would be the ones that would be in this game.
I don't know. You could tweak the design, like you could bring them forward a little bit, but they should not. Like, the nuts and bolts designs look fine when they're running around in nuts and bolts, but as static imagery, they're hideous.
Oh, yeah. They look way better in-game than they do in the models. And then fan edits of the models to give Banjo, like, googly eyes, even those look leagues better than the way it currently looks.
As we've mentioned before, the biggest sin of the nuts and bolts artwork was that the eyes were small and beady, and they weren't big and googly, and that's where they went wrong with it. You gotta have fucking big, old, googly eyes the size of saucers, or else there's gonna be this weird, unpleasant feeling when you look at the characters. Kind of like when you look at those blood red Christmas trees in a White House right now. There's just something wrong about it, and you don't really know what, but you know it's probably going to be eating your soul when you're not looking, so you just want to get away from it. That's the way the nuts and bolts eyes look to me. Well, yeah, so anyway, there's your fucking Banjo-Threeie episode, everybody. Stay tuned on the next episode of The Kongversation, because we'll be talking about, you guessed it, Sea of Thieves! The Sea of Thieves comic book. Yes, everybody's two favorite Kongversation Season 6 topics. Sea of Thieves and comic books together at last, like Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. You're welcome.
I'm excited for that episode that definitely hasn't already been recorded.
This has been a File 2 production.
Banjo-Threeie, 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 Banjo-Threeie.